Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with filmmaker and author Bob Quinn.
When this belief system got rid of, in stepped the commercial interests who said there is salvation in acquisition. I'll tell you the background to this. Sigmund Freud, you've heard of,
yes.
Of course. His nephew was Edward Bernays in New York. And Bernays took his uncle's philosophy of consciousness and hidden subconscious, and he said this could work with people. If there's a subconscious, what we must appeal to is not the person but their subconscious. Brilliant man. He just saw it, and they didn't sell, and he persuaded all manufacturers, you're not selling a thing, you're selling an idea.
Yes.
I'll show you this, which I got from my daughter. It's wonderful. You mean a woman can open it? Postcards, and these were the slogans. And the wife saying to the husband, now you listen to me, I'm not complaining, I'm not nagging, I'm just telling you, I want $450 and I want it now for a Hoover, a down payment on a Hoover, you know? And the man remonstrating with his wife, who was on her knees cleaning the fire, you'll ruin your shoes that way. They're ruined enough as it is, she says. It's not my fault if my shoes... Anyway, this was the start of actual feminism in the 30s, you know?
Yes.
These advertisers said to women, you can have anything you want. And don't be listening to these men. Don't be listening to your husbands. You buy anything you want, you know. The way to a man's heart, cremola custard. They still kept women in their place, but they gave them courage to stand up to their husbands so that their husbands would buy new things for them, while their husbands were buying new cars, of course. Yes. Anyway, advertising is the basis. And Edward Bernays, I blame for this whole idiocy.
But if we take the Catholic Church, and you know, in my lifetime it's gone from being the kind of the dominant force in our society to now its current state, and that transformation has taken place largely, from what you're saying, because of the scandals which erupted 25 years ago, which caused a lot of disillusionment among its followers. But if you have these two alternatives, you know, a dominant church running things and a church on its knees because of its own failure to grasp the nettle, are they the only alternatives we have? I mean, was it either we stick with the triumphant church or we end up with this society run amok because the glue has dissolved? Do you know what I mean? Is there a happy middle ground somewhere?
Yeah, the happy middle ground is advertising. That teaches you there is a world beyond your domestic messiness. You know, if you buy this will make you happy. If you buy this deodorant, you'll get the man. In other words, instead of praying to St. Anthony or St. Francis or something, they were encouraged to pray for release and freedom. Freedom to buy what they liked.
But you're not saying that's a good thing, are you?
I'm saying it's tragedy.
That's
disastrous.
Right, yeah. So,
and it's an ideology, you know. Your freedom to buy, spend as much as you like.
I wonder if I extrapolate from what you're saying to its logical conclusion, it would suggest that back in the 50s, say, we were living in an idyllic paradise,
fairyland,
because the church ran everything, and we had very limited ideas about anything outside the Catholic sphere. But compared to what we have now, it was paradise.
What have we got now? I'll tell you what we've got. We've got young people who work in Dublin. Everybody has to work in Dublin because that's what capitalism does. It concentrates everything into a centre, and Dublin is a necropolis, a dead city now. And if you ignore the drinking and the Heineken ads and all of that gay thing that's showed by the advertisers who persuade people this is paradise. And what it has is young couples fall in love, marry, have a couple of kids, can't afford a house. They commute from Mullingar, from Carlow, from Athlone to Dublin, where the jobs are. They spend 2 hours commuting in the morning, 2 hours commuting in the evening. They see their children maybe for an hour in the evening and into bed exhausted, treadmill. They're on a treadmill now. It's straight out of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which he wrote in 1935. And it comes back to what I said at the start. There's only one change that's permanent, and there's only one thing that's permanent, and that's change, entropy. So it's an inevitable move to this entropy. of our species. We know it now. The climate is telling us, you know. And that's why I live here. That's why I moved here 50 years ago. I saw it all 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I saw it.
If I can try and tie together some of the things you're saying, because you're touching on some really fascinating areas that perhaps I wasn't expecting, but I want to tease them out if I can. You've spoken about De Valera and the speech he made in the 1940s about the
small
dancing at the crossroads and
entertaining
the small homesteads and so on. And I mentioned De Valera again in the context of his opening remarks when RTE, or Television, began, and how he almost seemed to fear the negative consequences of television. And you've mentioned the Catholic Church and how it was the glue that held things together. And I'm wondering if the corollary of everything you're saying is that, bad and all as things were back in the 40s and 50s, we were actually better off then. We didn't know it at the time, but we were better off than we are today.
But we were less worried.
Is it a choice between...
We were only worried about going to hell.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
that was so far away that it didn't worry us really. We lived our lives and sang and danced, and I had a ball anyway.
But everybody now, well, not everybody, but a lot of people who look back on that period, disparage it because they regard it as the Dark Ages.
That's the party line. That's the party line of the conspiracy between politicians on the make and these commercial forces, and above all, of course, the American dream. Whereas there are no poor people in America. You've noticed that? No poor people in America. All Americans are beautiful, tall, clean, perfect teeth, everything. There are no poor people in America, except perhaps maybe 200 million, 250 million. But they don't count really, because we are Americans and we're the richest, proudest, strongest country on earth. This is the perfect empire, and it has television to broadcast its message of perfection. And the wonderful thing about it is that on television and on YouTube, you see subversive things, wonderful, that subvert this lie. But nobody pays any attention to them, so they're too busy looking at the Game of Thrones and the Vikings and things that distract them from their lives. That's what they want. A woman said it to me, a television producer said it to me once when I was talking like this, and she told me she had a collection of Barbie dolls from her childhood, and she still collected them. I said, but that's infantile, isn't it? She said, no, it keeps me happy and comfortable and reminds me of my childhood. And anyway, all I want to do is go home in the evening and sit and be washed over by the television. Rubbish or not, I don't care. Just it's chewing gum for the eyes, as Noel Coward said many years ago.
Yeah.
And she was one of the formative elements. That's the problem. The educated formative elements are the betrayers of the people who are not in control of their lives. Nobody's in control of their lives now except lunatics.
So,
like me.
Well, there's so many ways we could go with this conversation, but I'm wondering, based on what you've said, that there's an inevitability almost about the way in which society has evolved in this country.
Entropy.
From the Dark Ages of De Valera's Ireland to the new hinterland of consumerism, TV, American propaganda, all that kind of stuff. And we are being swept along in this kind of tide from the 50s right up to the 2020s and beyond. Is there nothing that we can do? Is there nothing that as a society we can do, or is it up to the individual to recognise what's going on? Yeah,
we can live authentic lives. All change begins with yourself. You can change yourself. That's the only thing you can change, for good or ill. But you can only change yourself. You can't change the big system, which is what I was trying to do 50 years ago, as I was young. That's what young people do. Now I just accept it. And the main reason I accept it is I have started studying evolution and Darwin. And I know it was abused and he was misquoted and everything, But his basic truth was that everything evolves. Everything evolves. What he didn't anticipate was that everything evolves and dies. Even though death was inherent in his examination, because everything dies, species dies, it's replaced by another species which evolves, another species evolves until we get these wonderful intelligent bipeds who are destroying themselves. We are. And one of the best positive things that has happened is And the only thing that has woken people up is evolution. Climate change is evolution. Did you know that 85% of the history of this planet, billions of years, 85% of that time was a condition of global warming? In other words, there was carbon dioxide all over the place. 15% of that time was ice ages, when the place was full of ice. In between those cracks, this miserable little species evolved, which is heroic and wonderful achievement. The fact that we're alive is amazing. I wonder every day when I walk around among my trees, I said, this is a miracle that we're alive.
I'm just moving because I want to get your book, because there's something I marked which I wanted to ask you about. It's about, you were talking about RT, it's the chapter titled The Oldest Profession, which is the one I really liked. And you said, this is the final paragraph, and you said, my personal belief was that RT had almost given up on the attempt to maintain an individual Irish voice, and were finally conceding that centuries of indoctrination had worked, that the Irish were not only incapable of governing themselves, of thinking independently, but that Ireland itself was no longer a reality. I suppose the key question that comes into my mind is there something which is uniquely or authentically Irish that distinguishes us from other countries, other races, that we have lost or are in danger of losing?
I think you're referring to culture, because that's all that differentiates different peoples. We're all the same species,
yes,
Homo sapiens, sapiens, mind. So we're all the same species, but we differ in that we have different cultures. And I'm not talking about colour of skin or anything. I'm talking about different ways of speaking, languages, singing, music. And what is, I think, unique to this country is we haven't preserved it, it has preserved itself. Traditional music has preserved itself in this country, and it's so rich that it has spread its tentacles out throughout the world. I'm not saying river dance is traditional Irish music, it isn't at all. Bill Whelan never claimed it to be even Irish music, and I know where it came from, Eastern Europe, the rhythms and everything. But it has spread throughout the world because it took elements of traditional music, instrumentation, dance, and it choreographed it beautifully, John McColgan and Moya Doherty, and they made this amazing thing. But it all sprang from traditional Irish music, and traditional Irish music is the only unique thing we have in this country. I mean, we have a language as well, but nobody speaks it except people here and there and everywhere.
Now, I know you've done a lot of work on tracing the origins of Irish culture, and I believe it's controversial in terms of where you believe it sprang from. But nevertheless, it's here, and it was here. Do you think that is sufficiently protected or preserved or robust enough to withstand?
It's not protected. It's not supported enough. It still lives, because where you ever get 5 or 6 people together who can play a fiddle or a buska, they will enjoy themselves for hours with music. Music is the only solvent to all of these difficulties that we mention. Music was always the solvent, and it's because we don't understand it. We just play it and enjoy it. And traditional music is the backbone of this country. And it's trotted out, of course, when the royals come over and they get a couple of Irish dancers, that sort of ridiculous thing. But the heart of it is really a bunch of people sitting around playing music, the same tunes, and they all know the same tunes, and they know when to change. It's an amazing business, And
how would you characterise it today? Is it in good shape or is it poor shape?
Traditional music is in the best shape it's ever been in. Because I remember a time when, for instance, when I was growing up, if a Shannon singer came on Radio Air and we turn it down, or somebody would say, turn down that wailing, Amazing. And I learned it when I came here. I didn't learn to sing it. I could never sing it. But when I came here, I saw how it welded people together, because it's stories sung. And stories is what keep people together. I don't think much of Irish writing, really, I try to write, but I'm hopeless. I can't write novels. I'd write them, but they're unpublishable. But I still keep writing because I love writing. But now I see that this strange revolution has culminated in Irish publishing being exclusively devoted to chick lit. Not exclusively, obviously, but there is the odd good book that comes out. But it's mainly chick lit. Why? Because 75% of the readers of books are now women. Men only read biology, biography. Women read fiction. And 75%, 80% of the staff of publishing houses now are female. So they know what sells, and that's why Chicklet gets published. Sally Rooney, not so much Sally Rooney, but Celia Hearn started it, I think, with Piss, I Love You, which I never read, but I saw stacked up in German shops 10 years ago, or 20 years ago.
I don't think it's Piss, I Love You. I think it's P.S. I Love You.
Oh, thank you for the correction.
I thought you were being ironic there.
I am.
Right. You mentioned literature. I mean, we are renowned, apparently, as being this great literary nation.
That's a tourist gimmick. It's nonsense.
For
James
Nobel
Joyce
Prize
would
winners.
laugh at us. Beckett would weep at us.
Right.
Dining out for 50 years, 60, 70 years on two writers who despised the narrowness of this country. But we're optimists. We're a peasant country. We see the optimistic part of things, and we make money out of these dead writers and attract tourists here on the pretense that we're a literary people. We are not a literary people at all. Read any paper. You can see the illiteracy that, well, mainly it's because they're too mean to hire. I can't afford to hire copywriters who will check all these stupid mistakes, even in the paper record, the Irish Times. Every day I buy it. I don't buy it every day, but I only buy it on a Saturday now. Still I'm confronted with these bloomers in the headlines. Just illiteracy, you know.
Can I come back to this quotation again? And two things in particular that you mentioned. You were talking about RT again, but you're talking in broader terms with the Irish, who are not only incapable of governing themselves or of thinking independently. Now, these are themes that you've mentioned already. The thinking independently is something that you've, referred to by virtue of this consumerist deluge that has swamped over the country.
But sure.
Yeah, but governing themselves, is that something you particularly think is the case?
I observe the ungovernability of this country, and sometimes I sympathise with the politicians because I look at the chaos of the country, the gang wars, the shootings daily on our streets, the suicide crashes. And I say, this is chaos. Now, this may be an old man's perspective, but I look about it and I read about it and I see it and I say, this is a crazy country. And it's ungovernable. Nobody could govern this country, which is why the politicians retreat into their protective shells and talk among themselves, and why our media concentrate on idiotic political debates, and they treat elections as the grand national. Who's going to win? Who's going to come second? And so the politicians retreat into this little bubble in defence. They pull the caravans around and surround themselves from the attacks, and they try to ignore the wild Indians beyond Leixlip, And it takes farmers with their tractors to waken them up. And the politicians shrug their shoulders and say, let them have their day out, It's like Bertie Ahern. In 1993, was it 2003, when Britain and America conspired to start an illegal war by attacking Iraq to get rid of, ostensibly to get rid of a dictator, Saddam Hussein, but actually to get their hands on the oil. It's all about oil. And 100,000 of us, I went up to Dublin, 100,000 of us marched through the streets of Dublin to protest against us supporting the Iraq war and letting the Americans bring their guns and killing machines through Shannon. And Bertie Ahern said something like, sure, let them have their day, Yeah. And I thought, he's a tutor, that man. He was brilliant, actually. Brilliant person, He knew how to manipulate things, because he was a manipulator, essentially. He was not a politician, he was a manipulator. And politicians really feel helpless, and besieged. And they come out of their shells every 4 years and promise this, that and the other. And unfortunately, people are naive and innocent. We are innocent and naive. We actually still think that politicians can represent us from Dublin. And they destroyed the power of the local authorities. They centralised the power. This is democratic centralism, which was a Stalinesque move democratic centralism, that's what it is. And I remember the Stickies used to advocate that, the official IRA. So our politicians are shy. They're terrified, actually. And particularly the old lags who have made it. It shouldn't be a lifetime job, a politician. Nobody could stick that for more than 4 years without becoming corrupt. It reminds me of what a wonderful American writer, what was his name? Great cynic. And he was asked, did he think that Obama was corrupt? And he said, well, in order to get nominated for the White House, you have to have been bought at least 10 times beforehand. So I sympathise with politicians. They're helpless and they refuse to change. That's why everybody voted for Sinn Féin. They didn't vote for Sinn Féin, the IRA, murderers, thugs, provisional IRA.
Yes.
They voted for a change, a dramatic change in our system. And now we see all the pussyfooting that's going around desperately from the establishment parties, the two major parties who've run this country for the last 100 years, pussyfooting around, They know they should unite because they are exactly the same ideologically, but they're afraid to because they need competition to persuade people to vote for this boxer or that boxer, It's horrible the way people are manipulated,
So it sounds like the ungovernability you're referring to is, well, if I interpret you correctly, is not a peculiarly Irish phenomenon, because you've mentioned America. Is it a phenomenon to do with just our current age, or is there something inherent in the Irish psyche, character, society?
No, not in the Irish.
That makes us ungovernable.
No, we're human beings like everybody else. Every human race and culture, there's no such thing as race, in history. I mean, the Greeks kept slaves. George Washington kept slaves, and he never lied. No, it's part of I think it's something to do with our adaptability, which is an evolutionary advantage.
As human beings, rather than as Irish.
Oh, people. Absolutely not as Irish. We're not unique. We're just human beings. Okay. We just have good music here.
Right.
No, human beings have survived because they've adapted to the latest environmental activity. For instance, this climate change scare is wonderful. It's woken people up. It's reminded them that it could all change tomorrow. And the coronavirus is reminding people we're fallible. We're not impregnable. We could be wiped out in a minute, and that's a very good thing. It's brought people to think fundamentally.
So whether we want it or not, we are part of a global society, is what you're saying. There's nothing...
Yeah, thanks to Peter Sutherland and his like.
Well, there's nothing that Ireland can do which isn't in tune with the march of history that's being represented by other countries.
Well, that's a fatalistic view. I think everybody can do something, even if it's only to shout. Even to shout. But people keep their heads down,
Is there anything that Ireland can do as a nation, either through its political representatives or through any...
Not since we joined the EU, We gave away...
Talk about the EU then.
We gave away our sovereignty, and it produced great benefits, and Albert Reynolds could come back waving 8 billion in his hands and got it, we're all saved, It was a sort of a marketplace business. We were in trouble. And this, being united with 27 countries, might protect us from the monstrous American empire, And indeed, the only thing that was protecting us from the American empire was the Russian empire. Once those two huge dragons were standing on the hills, glaring at each other, we down in the valley, we little peasants down in the valley, could get on with their lives. But then the Russian empire died in 1989, and there was nothing to stop the Peter Sutherlands of this world.
Okay, we're now going to look at the future and the potential threats facing the country. And what do you see as the biggest threat confronting Ireland?
As far as the future is concerned, I would be described as having a Katastrophensicht, which means I expect catastrophe. What we could do to avert the catastrophes that are certainly looming over us, Ireland can do nothing. Ireland consists of people, as James Connolly said. Individual people can do things. Ireland can do nothing. Ireland's helpless. Its politicians are hopeless. They've shrugged their hands. They're trying to survive. But individually is the only way anything can change, I believe. Individually, meaning a couple of people or a few people or a little group of people. And the first thing they should do is switch off their television sets. That's the first thing, because they are addling them. Television is addling their minds. The second thing is that they should get rid of at least one car. Some people have 3 or 4 cars. Get rid of one car. Now, people who commute every day and have 2 people having to work, husband and wife having to live, or husband and partner, or whatever they're called nowadays, having to work to pay the mortgage. Get rid of one car. No house should have more than one car. 2, grow vegetables in their garden. Voltaire, if you want to survive, plant a garden. No matter, obviously, most people now in Dublin, I'm not talking about Dublin, I'm talking about the whole country, and the only people who can do anything individually are people outside Dublin, because they're all trapped in Dublin. It's a rat race, it's a horrible necropolis. So forget about Dublin. Dublin is not going to save the country, Ireland. The people outside Dublin are going to save the country. Grow vegetables. You have a garden, you have 4 square yards of a garden. Plant something, just plant something. What else can you do? My main point is that change will not come. Change will come from above if you do nothing. The only thing that can change is yourself.
But it's not the interesting thing, because what you're saying is that the individual must do whatever is needed to be done by changing his or her lifestyle quite dramatically. Whereas the impetus at the moment seems to be that the governments of the world need to unite and create some kind of new direction for the planet. Because individually, even at country level, we can do nothing. China, perhaps, America, but small countries like Ireland can do very, very little.
Small countries like Ireland can do nothing. I'm not talking about countries. These are artificial things, countries, artificial, constructed by human beings to share power or distribute wealth or not distribute wealth, is mainly the case. The only thing that can change is individual people themselves, and individual villages and individual groups of people. They can change. That's the only thing they control. Change what you can control. Don't try to change what you can't control. You cannot control the evolution of the climate. It's happened.
So should we be voting for the Green Party? Is that a kind of...
You see, that's still thinking nationally. It won't start with an ideology. It'll start with individuals saying, I must live in a more sensible way, in a more human way, in a more natural way. And that means that respect the air you breathe, without which you'd be dead. Respect the air and the oxygen that you're imbibing. Create oxygen. I'm an oxygen farmer, by the way. That's why I planted 1,000 trees 50, 29, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So I regard myself as an oxygen farmer. I don't grow cows. I don't grow grass. I don't produce methane. I actually produce oxygen through photosynthesis. And I see that as the only thing I can do. But at least I do that. So look at your garden, look at your house, and everybody. I mean, people are addressed. People must do this, is what they say on television and radio. People must do this, not people. You must do this personally. You must create oxygen or counteract your carbon dioxide emanations, which you're doing every day with your car, with your electricity, with your fires, with everything. Limit those. And it's not just to save the world. You won't save the world. You might save your life, though, your own personal life. And personal survival really is at the top of our priorities. And the only way you can save your life is to concentrate on producing less carbon dioxide and creating more oxygen. I mean, that's laughable. I know it's laughable. Nobody will do that because people are too tied up and destroyed trying to survive and keep 2 cars going and keeping mortgages going and keeping everything else. I don't know. Well, I know what I can do.
Well, that's it for today. I would like to thank Bob Quinn for sharing his thoughts and opinions with us. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please listen out for the next episode coming up soon. Goodbye.